Welcome to another gripping episode of Animal Quests. Today we delve into the most chilling bear attacks ever documented. From a man dragged from his tent in the dead of night to a woman tragically mauled inside her own home, these stories will leave you in awe of nature's raw power. Let's begin with the harrowing tale of Julien Gauthier. It was a crisp, quiet evening along the Mackenzie River in Canada where Julien Gauthier and his friend Camille Toscani set up camp after another day of paddling. The sound of the river rushing past filled the air, a constant, soothing backdrop to their otherwise still environment. Julien, a musical composer, had come to the wilderness to record the natural sounds that would become the backbone of his next symphony. A piece he had been dreaming about for years, one that would immerse listeners in the sounds of the wild, grizzly bears, seals, and the harsh winds of the Arctic. It was a journey that had taken years of planning. Julien, a composer in residence with the Brittany Symphony Orchestra, had already earned recognition for his previous works, particularly Symphonie Australe, a composition inspired by the icy winds and the calls of penguins and seals. On that fateful day, he and Camille, a biologist and photographer, had set out to record sounds from Julien's homeland, Canada, where the vast wilderness had shaped his early years. The goal was clear: to document the raw, untouched sounds of nature and weave them into his symphony. Their trip along the Mackenzie River was ambitious, nearly 1,000 miles of rugged terrain, wild waters, and isolation. But it was the perfect place for Julien's next masterpiece. Each day was spent recording, Camille snapping photos of Julien as he worked. By the end of the month-long journey, Julien planned to return to France and create a mini-concert, where Camille's photographs would accompany the music. But what they didn't expect was that the very wilderness that inspired their work would soon become a source of danger. On August 6th, after 5 days of paddling, Julien had posted an update on his social media. The trip, he wrote, had been exhausting but deeply inspiring. He also mentioned the presence of bear activity, an ominous sign that something was stirring in the forest around them. Despite the distant presence of wildlife, they had seen little of human life for days, save for the occasional bear. The mention of these animals seemed like a passing note at the time, a small detail in the grand scheme of their journey, but it would turn out to be a haunting foreshadowing. The night of August 14th was like any other. After a long day on the river, they set up their tents and prepared dinner. They spoke of their plans for the next leg of the trip, laughing and reminiscing about their past adventures. Soon after, the two settled into their separate tents for the night, unaware that they were not alone in the wilderness. As darkness enveloped the campsite, something stirred in the underbrush. The wind had died down and the stillness was broken only by the rushing water of the river and the occasional snap of a twig. A large grizzly bear, its keen sense of smell drawn to the campsite, began to prowl, its massive form moving silently through the trees. With a nose that could pick up a scent from over 60 feet away, the bear honed in on the faint smell of humans. It was drawn to the campsite, where it found nothing but the remnants of food and the presence of two sleeping figures. The bear's instincts were sharp, its curiosity intense. It padded around Julien's tent, sniffing at the canvas. And then, without warning, it tore through the fabric, its claws easily slicing through the thin material. Inside, Julien stirred, but before he could fully comprehend the threat, the bear lunged. The weight of the animal slammed onto Julien, pushing him down into the dirt. He fought, struggling against the overwhelming force, but the bear's jaws found their mark, clamping around his neck with terrifying force. The attack was swift and unrelenting. The grizzly dragged Julien from the tent into the trees, its grip unyielding despite his desperate kicks and punches. Blood blurred his vision as his strength faded, his cries drowned by the roar of the river and the crushing power of the bear's jaws. Julien's body was dragged through the underbrush, leaving a trail of blood behind him as the bear pulled him deeper into the woods. His breath came in ragged gasps, his life slipping away as the weight of the bear pressed him into the earth. In the darkness, Camille slept, unaware that her friend, her traveling companion, was fighting for his life just a few feet away. When the first light of dawn crept into the sky on August 15th, Camille awoke. The sounds of the river and the cold morning air filled her senses, but something felt off. She unzipped her tent and stepped outside, immediately noticing the destruction. Julien's tent had been shredded, its fabric torn apart as if by some monstrous force. Heart-pounding, she called out for him, but there was no answer. Panic set in as she searched frantically, her eyes scanning the campsite for any sign of her friend. Following the trail of blood, Camille soon realized the terrifying truth: Julien was gone. In a daze, Camille ran to a group of nearby travelers who had set up camp for the night. Desperate, she explained the situation, and they quickly activated their emergency beacon. The signal was received by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police at 7:45 a.m., and a search was launched. The isolated location, only accessible by air and water, presented immediate challenges for rescuers. But the search was hindered further by poor weather conditions, delaying the recovery efforts. By the following day, Julien's body was found, his injuries consistent with a grizzly bear attack. The Department of Environment and Natural Resources confirmed that it was likely a grizzly that had taken Julien's life, although no conclusive evidence was released about the specific bear responsible. Despite the rarity of such fatal attacks, 3 had been recorded in the area since 2001. The tragedy was undeniable. Julien Gauthier's life was tragically cut short in the wilderness he loved, a stark reminder of nature's unpredictability. But his story is nothing compared to the next one. Brian and Marilyn Matayoshi's peaceful walk in Yellowstone quickly turned into a terrifying ordeal when they tried to outrun a grizzly bear, only to be caught by its claws. What followed is a chilling reminder that even in a national park, the wild can strike when least expected. It was July 6, 2011, when husband and wife Brian and Marilyn Matayoshi decided to take a peaceful walk through Yellowstone National Park. They were following the Wapiti Lake Trail on the park's east side in Wyoming. The weather was clear, with sunshine spilling through the trees and the air warm enough for a light jacket. The couple had brought their cameras and binoculars, eager to capture the beauty of the park. Marilyn had a small backpack with water and an extra sweater, and they paused frequently to admire the views and the wildlife. They watched birds, ospreys, falcons, and eagles perch in the trees, while the quiet flow of a nearby creek made the air feel even more serene. Around an hour and a half into their walk, they encountered another hiker who warned them of a brown bear with 2 cubs up ahead, about 500 yards along the trail. Grateful for the warning, Brian and Marilyn continued their walk, looking forward to the chance of seeing the bears from a safe distance. A short time later, they spotted the bears, 2 small cubs and their mother, a large grizzly. The cubs were playing in the meadow, their bodies tumbling through the grass, while their mother moved through the scene with a calm, steady gait. Brian and Marilyn stopped to take photos, both excited by the rare opportunity. They snapped several shots, trying to capture the peaceful family before moving on. As the mosquitoes began to swarm, they decided it was time to turn back. Just as they retraced their steps, they encountered the bears once again, but this time, the mother grizzly and her cubs were much closer, less than 100 feet away. The sight of the bear and her cubs so near the trail sent an immediate jolt of unease through the couple. They stopped, unsure of how to proceed. The mother bear, noticing them, began to move toward them. The pair were frozen in place, aware of the danger but unsure of what to do. The park's guidelines were clear: stay still, stay calm, and avoid sudden movements when a bear is near. If attacked, it was advised to lie down and protect the neck and head. But the instinct to flee was overwhelming. Before they could think it through, they turned and started running as fast as they could. The crunch of their feet against the trail was muffled by the frantic thumping of their hearts. Panic surged through them. Marilyn believed for a moment they might outrun the bear, but when she dared glance back behind her, she saw the grizzly gaining on them. The bear's speed was terrifying. They managed to run almost 200 yards, but the bear was relentless. Marilyn veered off the trail, ducking behind a fallen log, praying the bear would pass. But the mother grizzly wasn't satisfied. The bear grabbed Brian, who was still on the path they had just walked, with one powerful paw, knocking him to the ground. The blow stunned him, leaving him motionless for a moment, but it was the deep bite to his leg that caused him to scream. The bear's jaw sunk into his flesh, tearing through muscle and cutting into the femoral artery. The blood flowed quickly and Brian was unable to move. His life slipped away right there on the trail. Marilyn, helplessly watching from her hiding place, was paralyzed by fear. She lay as still as possible, face down in the dirt, her legs trembling with terror and her heart pounding in her chest. The only sounds were the bear's growls and the heavy thud of its paws through the dirt. She squeezed her eyes shut, praying the bear would not notice her. After what felt like an eternity, the bear seemed to lose interest in Brian and move away. Marilyn had held her breath, praying it would leave her alone. For a few minutes she stayed on the ground, unsure whether the danger had passed. Then, cautiously, she crept over to Brian. He lay still, his face pale, his legs soaked in blood. Marilyn's desperate attempts to revive him were futile. She pulled out her phone, but there was no signal. Frantically, she dialed 911 repeatedly, but there was nothing. In a panic, she waved the phone high in the air, hoping to reach someone. Eventually, another hiker appeared and they called for help. But by the time rescuers arrived, it was too late. Brian had died from the attack. The authorities decided not to euthanize the bear right away, but after another fatal encounter in the same area, they confirmed the same bear was responsible for both attacks. With the evidence clear, the decision was made to kill the grizzly. The two cubs were removed from the park and sent to a wildlife center. Marilyn, still grappling with the shock and grief, sifted through Brian's belongings and discovered his camera, filled with countless photos of the park. The last image he had captured was one of a mother grizzly and her cubs strolling peacefully through the meadow, an image that marked the final moments of serenity before everything changed. The brutal attack that followed shattered the calm of the day, leaving Marilyn to mourn the loss of her husband. The life they had built vanished in an instant, and all that remained were the photographs, immortalizing a peaceful moment that would never come again. The attack on Brian Matayoshi left Marilyn reeling, but the wilderness still held its dangers. Just a few years later, in the remote Alaskan wilderness near Pogo Mine, Aaron Johnson, a seasoned field technician, would encounter a threat unlike any other. What began as a typical day in the wild soon turned into a desperate struggle when a bear attacked with terrifying force. It was June 19, 2017, when Aaron Johnson, 27, was assigned to work at Pogo Mine, located 90 miles east of Fairbanks in the rugged Alaskan wilderness. An experienced field technician with Alaska Biological Research, Aaron had spent years immersed in the outdoors, applying her studies in geology and botany to the wild landscape around her. It was the kind of work she had always dreamed of, a blend of adventure and science. The day had started like any other, with Aaron and her colleague, 38-year-old Ellen Trainer, being dropped off by helicopter to begin their fieldwork. The Pogo Mine, a gold mine with ties to both Japanese and Australian companies, was situated in bear country, an environment where safety precautions were paramount. All employees, including Aaron and Ellen, had undergone bear safety training, learning how to use bear spray effectively and the option to carry rifles into the field. On this day, 6 employees were assigned to various sites, paired for safety, with Aaron and Ellen working together. The duo had been briefed and equipped, aware of the potential dangers but determined to complete their tasks. They were collecting geological samples along a transect, detailed work that required precision. The women crouched low to the ground, documenting the soil's structure, vegetation, and pH, absorbed in their task. The forest around them was thick, the sounds of the wilderness humming softly as they worked, unaware of the danger closing in on them. A male black bear, hungry and on the prowl, had been tracking them from a distance. The bear, using the wind to its advantage, had crept closer and closer, its eyes locked on the two women. It was only when Aaron and Ellen looked up, their eyes meeting the bear's, that they realized the danger they were in. The predator was no longer hiding. Its immense presence was impossible to ignore. In that moment of realization, the two women instinctively reached for their bear spray. But before they could even use it, the bear surged forward with terrifying speed. It covered the distance between them in an instant, its claws raking Erin's body as it knocked her to the ground. Ellen, desperate to protect her colleague, sprayed the bear in the face. But the bear was undeterred, its aggression only intensifying. Erin was pinned beneath the bear, helpless as the animal bit and clawed at her, its immense strength rendering her powerless. Ellen continued to spray, shouting, attempting to distract the bear long enough for Erin to escape. But the bear turned on Ellen, attacking her just as ferociously as it had attacked Erin. The struggle was brutal, a blur of claws, teeth, and desperate cries for help. Despite their best efforts, the bear seemed impervious to their resistance. It wasn't retreating as most bears would do when confronted with a threat. Instead, it was intent on its attack, its eyes locked on its prey. The two women fought back, but the bear's strength and determination were overwhelming. It seemed there was no escape. The bear finally retreated, its hunger momentarily sated. Ellen, dazed and disoriented, managed to call for help over the radio, transmitting a mayday alert. The male pilot of a nearby helicopter, having heard the distress call, quickly altered course. The helicopter, just 5 miles away from the mine, rapidly closed the distance. Ellen lay motionless, barely aware of the whirling blades above as the helicopter descended. The winch was lowered and Ellen was lifted into the air, her body limp and unresponsive. As she was hauled up to safety, the pilot turned the helicopter back toward the mine. Ellen was soon transported by ambulance to the hospital in Fairbanks, but Erin was nowhere to be seen. The helicopter returned to the site and a Pogo mine employee was lowered to search for Erin. He found clear signs of the struggle: blood, scattered equipment, and flattened vegetation, but no trace of Erin. Determined, he followed a blood trail through the dense forest. After a short distance, he spotted the bear standing over Erin's body just 30 feet from the last sign of struggle. Without hesitation, the employee raised his rifle and fired, killing the bear. But it was too late. Erin had succumbed to her injuries. The vibrant young woman who had dedicated her life to the outdoors, who had married her best friend just weeks earlier, was gone. Her death was a devastating loss, not only for her family and friends, but for the entire community. Ellen, severely injured, was transported to the hospital in Fairbanks where she would recover from her injuries, though she would never forget the brutality of the attack. The Department of Fish and Game launched an investigation confirming that this was a predatory bear attack, an extremely rare and deadly occurrence. It was determined that the bear had stalked them for nearly 15 minutes before the attack, slowly closing the gap behind them and using the forest to stay hidden. News of the attack spread quickly and fear began to sweep through the Alaskan communities. The incident was the second fatal bear mauling in the state within the same week. Concerns mounted. Were bears now seeing humans as prey? Were these rare attacks becoming more common? The Alaska Department of Fish and Game issued warnings urging people to carry bear spray and stay vigilant in the wilderness. But the tragic reality was clear. No amount of preparation or safety equipment could guarantee survival in the face of such a determined predator. Erin's death, though part of a rare and deadly pattern, would forever be remembered as a haunting reminder of the dangers lurking in the wild. Erin Johnson's life had been one of passion, adventure, and dedication to the natural world. Her untimely death in the Alaskan wilderness was a sobering reminder of nature's indifference and the unpredictable dangers it holds. Yet, those dangers are not confined to remote landscapes. Sometimes they intrude upon the places we consider safe, our homes and communities. Thousands of miles away in the quiet town of Mora, New Mexico, a peaceful morning turned into a nightmare when 93-year-old Adelia Trujillo came face to face with a 250-pound bear, a confrontation that would change everything in an instant. It was a calm, warm morning in Mora, New Mexico, where Adelia Trujillo, at 93 years old, went about her day in her small, tin-roofed house. The day was not unlike any other for the elderly woman whose life had been marked by simplicity and a deep connection to the land. She had never been one for modern conveniences, preferring instead the steady rhythm of a quieter life. Raised with strong values, Adelia was a woman who made sure to share the traditions of her heritage with her family, from cooking meals on her wooden stove to telling her grandchildren the stories of their ancestors. She was a woman who knew her mind, guided by her unwavering faith. But on this particular day, Adelia would encounter something she never expected, something that would change the course of her life forever. It had been a normal morning. Adelia completed her prayers, tidied up her home, and began her daily tasks. There was a soft breeze outside, the type that ruffled the dry desert brush but did little else to disturb the stillness. Adelia wasn't in a rush to go anywhere, but that afternoon she had planned to visit the Senior Citizen Center like she did most days to check on her friends. As she moved about, the peaceful quiet was suddenly shattered. The back door, which she often left ajar to let in the fresh air, was forcefully thrown open. Adelia, startled, rushed to the kitchen, her thoughts racing. She wondered if someone had broken in, perhaps a thief looking for something of value. But when she reached the doorframe, her eyes locked with the last thing she could have imagined: a massive black bear standing in the doorway, blocking her path. The animal's dark eyes blinked in the dim light of the room, its fur matted and unkempt. Adelia froze. The bear was huge, easily weighing over 250 pounds, and it looked just as confused to see her as she was to see it. Standing at nearly 6 feet tall, it towered over the frail woman, who was barely 5 feet 3 inches in height. Her heart pounded in her chest as the fear crept in. She knew that if the bear decided to attack, there would be no chance of her surviving. Adelia's instinct, however, wasn't to remain still. In a panicked moment, she screamed, the sound piercing the air. It was a natural reaction, but a dangerous one. Bears, much like many wild animals, can become aggressive when startled, and her cry only served to escalate the situation. The bear shifted, its ears perked, and without hesitation it charged. Adelia spun around and ran, her frail body struggling to move quickly enough. The house was small, and she knew that running toward the back of the house wouldn't save her. Her only thought was escape, but the bear was much faster. Within moments, it was on her, slamming her to the floor with terrifying strength. The pain came quickly. Adelia was thrown into a helpless struggle as the bear's claws raked through her skin, its teeth sinking into her. She was completely at the mercy of the wild creature that had invaded her home. Fear coursed through her, but her faith remained strong. She whispered to herself, believing that God would watch over her, whatever the outcome. It wasn't long before Adelia's strength began to fade. The bear, in its primal hunger, continued its brutal attack. The damage was severe. Within minutes, the woman who had lived so many years with such vitality was left lifeless in her kitchen. Hours later, Adelia's grandson, Richard Ortega, went to check on her as he often did. Their homes were next to each other, separated only by a short distance. Richard liked to visit his grandmother to make sure she had what she needed, from food to simply companionship. But that afternoon, something felt off. When he arrived at the house, he immediately noticed the disarray. The back door, now wide open, sent a chill down his spine. As he entered the house, his calls for his grandmother went unanswered. He moved quickly through the rooms, a sense of dread growing with every step. When he reached the kitchen, the sight that greeted him left him breathless, his world suddenly falling apart. There on the floor was his grandmother. The large, bruised and bloodied form of Adelia lay in the place where she had spent most of her days, her body disfigured beyond recognition. Richard's heart shattered as he knelt beside her, his tears flowing freely. He immediately called the police and they arrived shortly after. An investigation was quickly launched, with the bear's location becoming the priority. Adelia's family, while devastated, was determined that the animal be found. The authorities had reason to believe that the bear had been wandering in the area in search of food, likely driven by the unusual scarcity of natural sources. The summer had been harsh, with dry conditions followed by late frosts that had decimated crops. The once plentiful fruit trees in the area were bare, leaving the bear to wander in search of scraps. It didn't take long for the authorities to locate the animal. Just half a mile from Adelia's house, the bear was cornered, its days of wandering and hunger coming to a swift end. It was a 4-year-old male weighing around 250 pounds, just the right size to have overpowered a frail elderly woman. Officials speculated that the bear had lost its fear of humans due to the food scarcity that year. With few natural food sources in the area, it had likely wandered closer to home, searching for anything it could scavenge. The news of Adelia's death spread quickly throughout Mora, with many in the community shocked at the rarity of such an attack. It had been more than a century since a bear had killed someone in the state. Locals had heard of bear sightings, but most encounters were non-threatening. The tragedy marked an end to the peace that had defined Adelia's life. Adelia Trujillo's death was a reminder of the unpredictable dangers that lie hidden in the wilderness, and the fragile balance between humans and the wild creatures that roam the earth. While the tragedy of her passing would forever haunt her family, there was solace in knowing that her faith had remained unshaken until the very end. In the end, though the loss was great, her legacy remained a testament to the strength of a woman who had lived her life on her own terms, regardless of what came her way. Thank you for joining us as we uncovered the worst bear attacks ever recorded. These unsettling encounters show just how quickly danger can strike. But don't leave just yet, there's one more story to tell. It's the shocking account of Chase Delwo, whose hunt in Montana spiraled into a nightmare when a grizzly bear attacked with brutal force. What happened in the moments that followed is more than a fight for survival, it's a chilling reminder of nature's terrifying unpredictability that will stay with you forever. Click to watch the full story.